Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 12 of AIInsights, the Executive Brief. I'm your host, Ben Bohman. Today, I'm joined by Neil Wilkins, a renowned expert with over 35 years of experience in the marketing industry. Neil has guided around 5,000 students globally and works with business leaders and individuals to help them find clarity and direction. As a psychology graduate, Neil is passionate about mindfulness, self-awareness, and personal development. In this episode, we're going to dive into how AI is shaping the future of marketing. Stay tuned for an insightful conversation.
My name is Neil Wilkins. I'm based in the UK. I have a podcast, the snappily titled Neil Wilkins Podcast. It's quite easy to remember if you know my name. And I look after a number of different clients as well as a lot of learners. So I'm an educator working with Cambridge Marketing College, and I have a few hundred mentoring sort of guests and students who I look after. And enabling the next generation of marketing is how I pitch myself.
Nice. Neil, thanks for jumping on with me. I know we met because I had the pleasure of joining you on the Neil Wilkins podcast, and it was a fun conversation, and I'm glad you could join me as well. Now, that podcast is focused around a lot of things, but sustainable marketing and marketing practices is one of them. Did that podcast, was that created because of AI and then you started the podcast, or did this your podcast start, and then it grew into having the AI conversation as AI started getting popular? Walk me a little bit through the evolution of it.
Yeah. Yes, it's the latter, actually. I mean, it began in earnest really in COVID. So we were all in lockdown across the globe, and I had recorded, I probably would say 10, maybe 15 episodes, a really eclectic mix. It was a bit marketing, but it was also mindfulness, mindful living, and kind of trying to bring value to marketers. But I had the crazy plan of seeing whether I could record 50 episodes in 50 days. So it literally was record, publish. And of course, there was nothing much else to do in lockdown. So I did achieve it. And then 60, 70 episodes later, it was, okay, this is a thing. People are listening. I'm actually adding maybe a bit of value, and I'm getting some really good guests. Nice. And so it then evolved into, okay, what are the key themes that marketers, predominantly business owners and entrepreneurs, are really tussling with that I could bring value for? And certainly sustainability, carbon credentials, environmental sort of things, obviously of really, really paramount importance. But then came AI, and AI has kind of swamped everything else in its wake. And it's been really exciting to see that emerge and connect with a whole host of different guests, including yourself.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff. Now, I am interested in your work with Cambridge Marketing. Did you go to school at Cambridge as well? And then is this a tie that you have with them from your education, or how, tell me a little bit more about your work with the Cambridge Marketing?
Yeah, well, it is again sort of serendipity, really. And I didn't study with Cambridge Marketing at all. And in fact, they were doing a little bit of a local promotion in the Southwest in the UK here where I'm based, looking for some tutors, people to guide students on their journey. And I just happened to be going into a library and spotted this little flyer actually on the reception desk in this library. I mean, I don't go into libraries, but I was in this library and it shouted out at me, "Hey, we're looking for tutors." And my wife said, "Well, I think this might be you. Why don't you give it a go?" And so I made contact, and well, the rest is history. This is 25 years ago now. So I've been involved literally with the college for 2.5 decades. And so we've seen things come and go. Yeah, it's been quite a journey, a real kind of core, if you like, of my marketing practice now.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting how some things just call to you, and it's just like suddenly it's just like, hey, here it is. This is the path. This is how it's going to be. And it couldn't be louder. I love that. Now, I also like your focus on mindful marketing. And I think this idea of mindful marketing, especially in the age of AI, which is making it so anybody can be a marketer and anyone can put out marketing content per se, but putting out marketing content doesn't mean quality. And you and I have had the conversation about the human touch of just how humanity makes AI better. But walk us through this mindful marketing, this practice of mindful marketing, and then apply it to AI and where you're seeing it go with the industry.
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's something that I've been really passionate about for a long, long time. And I guess the word mindfulness, across the globe has got many different definitions, from kind of Zen and Buddhism in the Far East to kind of just a little bit of meditation and maybe just a little bit of being present in the West. And so I kind of really advocating for marketers and business owners to stay awake and to stay really present in the moment. So watching the competition, knowing what the trends are, not just relying on old practice, but actually seeing what is emerging and just really being mindful to doing things in an authentic and honest way. Because one of the big challenges I feel that we've had in business, in commerce, as well as in marketing more generally, is to kind of, on the one hand, tussle with helping customers to consume, but at the same time, not consuming from the world's valuable resources. There's this real kind of tussle between trying to do things, but doing things for the right reason. So really authentically and honestly, without consuming too much. So really adding value and working to a higher purpose. So I guess when we talk mindful marketing, it is about being purpose and value driven. So I'm really passionate about that being really at the core of all of our worlds and all of our practice. And I guess with AI, it kind of plays out that we can become much more efficient. So we consume less, but still add great value. We can be very mindful in the moment because AI allows us to spot the emerging patterns right here, right now. And it helps us to go deep into some of the things that otherwise we might just only have time to do at a surface level. So I'm really excited by how that can make us, really super efficient and go way beyond just content production. I think there's so many kind of nuances within AI that just brings this ability to be present and really mindful to life.
Yeah, this mass amount of information that we can now digest and look at. I mean, if you look at earlier and before, when we were marketing and going through what should we talk about, what can we talk about, what's relevant right now, we were limited by our own research. And now we're not, it's still our own research, but the speed which we can research stuff, the speed we can look at things has completely changed, and it's gotten so much faster. There's another word that I like that you use, and that's authenticity and authentic. And I think that's always something. It's interesting in business. And when you look at what the goal of business is, obviously we're all trying to make money. We're all trying to increase profitability. We're all trying to pay salaries, do all this stuff. And that word authentic, I think, can be difficult to maintain for a lot of companies, to put out a message that drives revenue, drives business, drives an ROI, drives a bottom line, all the things that you're supposed to do with marketing, but yet remain authentic. Elaborate on that word authentic from this marketing standpoint, because I think that's a fascinating word with marketing.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think it's about just knowing that if you don't do it, you're going to get caught out. I mean, again, just kind of playing full circle to your point about AI and the value it brings, is it does give the power to the customer, the power to the researcher in their hands. I mean, they can find out everything about everything that you've ever done. So if you start being fake, if you start greenwashing, if you start really stretching the boundaries of what is true in your marketing and communications, you are going to get found out. I mean, that is fact. So to me, it's about doing the right thing, but also making sure that you're future-proofing. Because, of course, as we know, the digital footprint is a legacy that is going to be there forever. So even if you look back 10 years ago, how authentic were you? If you look back a year ago, what were you kind of saying? Are there things there that you would rather you hadn't said? So I kind of think going forward, we are all going to have to be pure and kind of really honest, even if it means taking a little bit of a hit in the short term in terms of sales, in terms of profitability. If there are certain markets that we shouldn't really be addressing because they're kind of not really the markets we should be working with, or if in terms of sourcing raw product to make, or the widgets to actually make our products and services, if we do that in an inauthentic way, in other words, not sourcing from the right organizations or countries or best practice, it is going to get found out. The power is in the customer's hands. So I just want everybody to really be thinking this through and actually not cannibalizing the future for short-term gain. You've got to be playing the long game here.
I love that. And it's interesting as me being more on the engineering and IT side. And I know that at times my job is to be this interpreter between marketing and sales and maybe the CEO or president, but all the different organizations within the company. And I have to interpret technology in a way that makes sense to each individual person. And I think that's what makes a good technologist. So I'm interpreting to a CEO, to a CMO, to different people to make sure that technology makes sense to each individual person, that technology makes sense to each individual user and their responsibilities. Now, marketing, it seems very similar, that you also have to interpret and be an interpreter for different expectations. And I know from sometimes my engineering mind, if I want to market something, it might be very much too direct. Like I just be like, it's black and white, this is what it is. And maybe for different personas within the business, you have to also interpret how that message remains authentic, but take their vision and then interpret into a realistic message. Does that make sense? Is that a reality for marketing? Does that resonate with you?
It is an absolute reality. I think you've really kind of nailed something there that is so important, and I think certainly internally in kind of medium to larger size organizations, marketing itself is tussling with the emerging technologies and how it's going to use them as they come sort of into our sort of direct vision and under our control. At the same time as then actually playing out that marketing to all of the other customer-facing parts of the organization, be it sales, customer service, et cetera, et cetera. And I think having this kind of common language about, okay, the technology is one thing, the translation is another thing, but actually what does it truly mean to the customer? To me, that's the language that can bond us all together. And it isn't going to be about features and benefits any longer. It's going to be about customer outcomes. And I think if we can all be talking, no matter whether we're, in a sales role, in a business development or account management role, or whether we're behind the scenes in a marketing kind of strategy role, we've all got to be focused on this one thing, which is the customer outcomes, because AI and the technology can really add value then. But if we're all going off in different directions, it's going to be hard. It really is.
This gets me excited because I've had so many times where marketing has came to me from a technologist standpoint, different companies I've worked for, and they've wanted me to review a slick or review something they're putting out. And it's just bullet points about product. And so it's not just something that a technologist or different, again, personas that aren't marketing can struggle with. Marketing departments, especially in technology, because it gets overwhelming for them, all this jargon and all this logical info. It's easy for them to just, okay, I'm just going to info dump. And I was always the same way, exactly what you're talking about, where I'm like, wait a minute, like, what does this do for the company? Or what does this do for the business? What does this do for the customer? You're talking about a lot of technology rewards and benefits, but 5 other technologies do the exact same thing that we're doing. So how do we stand out? How do we be different? And that, I think, is important in marketing, is standing out and being different. And I think that's important in life, is if you do the same thing, say the same thing, have the same like motion, then you're just going to blend in and it's this blur of a bunch of competition. So standing out obviously is important. And what are some ways in marketing that you can help yourself, help businesses? Like, what are some good key points for standing out?
I think there's a couple of things going on here. This is a great question. I love this question because I think on a strategic level, it is all about, what is your purpose? What is that kind of key thing that nobody else is replicating, that nobody else is bringing to the market or to the customer? What is that? Well, we call it the USP, the unique selling proposition, that point of differentiation that just makes people say, oh, wow, now I get who you are. And I think it comes through with your values as an organization or as a group of people. I mean, if you're in a micro business, I mean, that can be very personal to the founder. It can be very personal to the person you're actually, engaging with. In a larger organization, there's work to be done to kind of figure out what is the collective value that you're bringing. But often that is the USP. It's not in the product. It's not in the service. It's not in the things that can be replicated. It's about the core, the thing, the culture that's at the center of this group of people you're engaging with. And I think that's really exciting. But I think the second part of the answer really is all about storytelling. It's about being almost a real kind of artist in your storytelling. People love stories. I'm getting this really strange, Ben, because at the moment I'm getting all of this stuff coming at me in so many different angles. So I'm getting invitations from people to appear on the podcast. They're storytellers. They help organizations to write stories. I'm seeing it in my feed on LinkedIn, for example. There's this organization doing storytelling. It's coming at me in every angle, and I can't then shy away from it. We talked serendipity a little bit earlier. I'm seeing this serendipity of storytelling. It's a phrase that I can't avoid at the moment because there's a big message coming at me. And if I'm being mindful as a marketer, I should be paying attention. So I would say to anybody listening to this is, if you've identified what your USP is, that differential that you have versus the competition, it's then about starting to use various kind of strategies and techniques to create some really well-crafted stories that narrate that story. That's going to be absolutely key. And then you've got something you can then really share that is differentiated. And also it's something that separates you from the rest of the market. That's going to be key going forward.
Yeah, there's an interesting tie-in to AI and the storytelling as I'm thinking about it, especially with how AI writes. AI is a very good technical writer. And if you go into marketing and you have good technical people writers and someone who can technically write with AI, you almost can't tell the difference. I think someone with a really good eye still can, but even sometimes you can, depending on the editing that's gone through it. But storytelling, AI still can't tell a story. And what I think people are wanting to see genuine, again, marketing, genuine print, genuine writing from companies. And it's so interesting that you say that, because the only way to do that where you put a human element into it is to tell a story. I'm not saying AI won't be able to tell a story someday, but right now and at this time, AI is a very poor storyteller. It just doesn't flow from that personalization, that empathy, and that kind of standpoint, but it writes technical. So I'm wondering if that's part of the reason that people are starting to see through all the AI stuff and maybe getting a little bit not jaded, but like, okay, I want something different. I want something that appeals to me. Another interesting thought. I like your conversation about the value proposition and the value of a company. And I think, and you hit the nail on the head too, about getting to know the company and the businesses you're writing to, because that's where you learn your value. And I remember sales leaders would always come with the value. You have to have your value prop. And my argument from a technologist, even a sales strategist and technology strategist, was you don't know your value until you've talked to a business for probably 30 minutes to an hour. Then you know what your value prop is for that business. But if you just go in and you tell them what your value prop is, it's not their value prop. It's what you think is valuable to them, right? So it's this interesting. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes absolute sense. And I think that was probably a missing piece in my answer to your question, because I think, it's always in the eye of the beholder. It's always the perception of the other that's key. I mean, you can decide what your big story is, but unless the story is, again, it's translation, unless the story is translated by the listener in a similar way to the way that you intended it, then you're not going to be scoring. You're not going to be scoring that run. So if you want that home run, you've got to make sure that you've both listened in advance, crafted the story that makes sense, and then, as you say, then replay it back and maybe fine tune it. I think there needs to be flexibility in that storytelling. And again, this isn't something necessarily that AI is going to be able to help you with, because it is those little nuances of just the little kind of single word that somebody then feeds back, and you think, oh, okay, this is a feeling person, not a thinking person, or right, this person's a little bit more introverted than extroverted. Right, okay, so I can pick up on that little nuance and then play back subtly differently. And of course, AI can give you the ideas to start the story, but it can't write the story at that level yet.
Yeah, I agree with that yet. I think we're going to get to an interesting point in the near future, maybe not exactly with story writing, but we'll see. The evolution and adaptability of AI is just it's just scaling rapidly right now. And I think we even talked about how where we're at now, it's going to be a totally different conversation, a year from now. Have you seen in marketing technology that has, I guess, two things? One, I don't see technologies that people in marketing fear usually. Usually marketing's this right up the front, cutting edge, embracing all technologies. But I've seen some resistance with AI in marketing so far. But aside from the fear standpoint from marketing, but have you ever seen any other kind of technology take hold the way AI has, and the conversation we're having, this explosive boom of conversational growth about AI. Have you seen anything like this?
It's a great question because I can remember back marketing and business pre-internet. I can remember it when websites first became a thing. I can certainly remember phase 2 or web 2, where we was doing this thing called social networking. That was an interesting concept. We don't have that anymore. It's all advertising on socials now, as we know, in our timelines. I've never seen anything like this. This is almost feels like it's a perfect storm. We've been waiting for this moment of technology to be able to live, let's call it hyper personalization, where a marketing message goes out that is absolutely pinpoint targeted on an individual, not a business, not a sector, not an industry, not a country, but actually to an individual. And we've got the capability technology wise now to be able to do that. That 10, 15 years ago was a dream. 30 years ago, it was the stuff of science fiction. So I think we've got to a point now where it is a perfect storm. And I think those who embrace this early, those who get in and figure out that it's beyond the technology is the enabler, but it's how you're going to use that really smartly and don't get kind of almost caught out by the 1,000 different apps that are available there to take up every minute of your day, because then you'll miss the whole point of why these things are there. And so to me, it's that kind of unraveling and selecting one or two things that are going to become your assistant. They're going to become your kind of trusted ally in a day-to-day job, rather than thinking, okay, I'm a prompt engineer, that is all I now do. That's just part of it, part of the mix.
Yeah, it's going to be, and I know I say this word a lot, interesting as things evolve, as we progress quickly in how it is being used. I'm not sure how it's being embraced yet. Completely. In fact, a lot of the conversations I have from different executives or different businesses, there's this acknowledgement that a storm's coming, if you want to call it that this is going to have to be used, and we need to start figuring it out. In your circles and your professional circles, it can't be all the same across the board. I mean, you probably have a very diverse group of thinkers that you hang around with. What's the thinking right now? Is there fear, acceptance? Like what are you seeing in your circle?
I think it's mostly fear, to be honest. I mean, I'd love to say that it's not fear and that it's everyone embracing it and everybody's seen the light and they've decided, how they're going to do it. But it's mostly fear. I think most marketers, most business people, most salespeople are actually fearful of change. Generally, I think, obviously there are many of us who actually embrace it because we get excited by the uncertainty. I think we're actually a rare beast in this whole mix. I think most people en masse are fearful of this uncertain moment of, is it coming for my job? How is my role going to look different? Actually, are the competitors going to get there before we do and figure it out? Is this going to cost us in the short term? All these things are going into this cauldron of uncertainty. And I think it's worrying, I think, for lots of people who don't welcome change and really embrace it. But I think what we're starting to see is some organizations and some people are beginning to see how you can position these, let's just call them AI technologies, but you can position them almost as a process that maps over or supports underneath your existing processes. So rather than see this as an add-on, something else you've got to factor into your already busy day, actually seeing that, okay, this can replace this part of something that actually isn't really high value that I do. Okay, now I've taken that time away. What am I going to use that extra 30, 40, 60 minutes for? Oh, planning. Oh, doing a bit of research. Oh, listening to customers, rather than just doing the admin or the processing, which is lower value. So I think that's what's going to take some of the fear away, is when people start to realize it's not coming for you per se, but it's coming to support certain elements of what you do. And if you can figure out by doing process mapping, all of the processes, some of the lower value, some of the higher value, you can then start to prioritize where you begin to then put some of these technologies into play and just experiment, just pilot, just test them at a small scale before then kind of really switching them on and turning the dial up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that fear is so interesting, and it makes sense. Of course, there's a lot of changes happening, but AI And again, we talk about maybe in the future, but right now, AI is really just at the point of replacing your tedious tasks, like you mentioned. That's such a wonderful thing. Is just, okay, well, if my day comprises of an hour to 2 hours of tedious tasks that AI can condense down to 30 minutes, like you said, it gives you so much more time back to yourself. And there's another point with that too, that I think to be made. And that's everyone, you don't have to feel pressured to implement AI or to embrace AI right now. In fact, I'm still an advocate of a more methodical approach, even though my business relies on people implementing and using AI. But I still say slow down, because it's going to change. There's going to be so much improvement, so much differentiation in the market over the next year to 5 years, that just slow down. Don't rush into making AI decisions. Look for ROIs and things that make sense for you. But most of all, learn AI, because I think, to your point, AI's not going to replace us, but it might replace those who don't start adapting with it. Does that resonate? Do you agree with that?
I do agree with that. And I think it's interesting when you were describing, this whole slow down thing. I actually find, if I listen to myself and how I've been using it, I'm finding that's exactly what I'm doing. So I might go in and think, oh, this is interesting. Perplexity.ai, for example. When I first came across that, I thought, I've got to go for the pro account. Not because I want to stay with them forever. I have been with them since I found them, and I have got the pro account, but I've also created, as an example there, I've put them on my list of things I've subscribed to, but to review next month.
Yeah.
So I've got this list of AIs where I've actually bought into the month by month subscription to them, but I've got a reminder in every month to just double check they're still providing the value I hoped for when I set them up. And I review it literally last day of every month just to check whether I want to subscribe again next month. So I've kind of, as you said that, and I hadn't even realized I'm doing this, I've kind of naturally slowed myself down, because there's a danger with these millions and millions of apps that are coming out. You could spend all of your time, all of your budget just subscribing and then never get a chance to use them. So I'm being kind of selective and slow and methodical, but always having that sense check to come back and just double check. I think that's quite healthy, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And that resonates so much with me, because I need to be more methodical with checking at the end of the month, like you. I'll just see something that's cool. And so I don't forget it, I'll go in and sign up for a 30-day trial. And then 60 days later, suddenly things will start pinging and I haven't even had a chance to mess with this, and I'm paying for it. And I don't know how many different subscriptions, but to your point, it is good because it's almost testing the waters. Okay, let's see what this does. And then I'd say that honestly, probably 60% of them I get in, I try it, and I'm like, that's cool, but it's not it's not saving so much time worth paying money. But by trying them out, and you said, the slower, methodical approach, I am finding things that are now staples in my daily life, where I'm okay, I can't live without this, because I think if I cancel this, how would my life be? How much more time would I be spending? And it's all about, that time savings and everything that. So where do you think we go next with AI and marketing? How do you think we progress with this? What do you think the next steps are? Embracing, learning, where do we go?
Yeah, I think probably the best option, and again, this is work in progress. I mean, the lovely thing about this conversation is there is no playbook. There is no definitive guide. We are making this up as we go, and that's all of us. Anybody who claims to be an expert, a specialist, no, they're making it up as they go. We all are. That's the really fundamentally exciting thing about it. I think the next steps on this one are going to be related to the customer journey. So my prediction is, as we start to form campaigns, as we do projects, as we look for business development, new product or service launches, we're putting those things into what we describe as the customer journey. So we're building awareness, we're trying to convert that awareness into a paying customer, and then we're building the loyalty at what we call the retention stage. So awareness, conversion, retention. I think the next step certainly that I'm looking at, is to see where each of these kind of AI tools can add most value. I've done this kind of quite religiously since social media began way back, and put certain social media or certain social networks at different points in the journey, and then kind of given them a job description.
Yeah.
So for me, something, say Twitter, is in the retention phase. So I'm not looking to create new business with it. It's a way of keeping in touch with people who are already customers or clients. LinkedIn, on the other hand, is actually in the awareness phase. So there will be people who are looking at LinkedIn for me, and have never encountered me before, but a lot of it is going to be that's new, generating new business there. So I'm kind of giving those things a different job description because they're at different points in the customer journey. I think AI is going to fill that kind of same need for me. So I can imagine there'll be things, perplexity, for example, right at the front of the customer journey. I'll be using that to do research on kind of where is the best market opportunity? What are the current trending terms if I'm going to put this ad out? That kind of thing, it'll be there. ChatGPT, for example, could be in the middle of the awareness stage where I'm needing to craft or get some ideas to craft some really interesting engagement stories that are kind of they're pre-sale, but they're there to kind of build the confidence in this prospect's eyes. So as they go and do deeper research into the offer that I've got, ChatGPT will be there serving that part of the process. And then maybe at the retention stage, it'll be all about building loyalty. And there may well be something in there where I'm using some specific AIs. And I've just noticed there's a new one that's just come onto the market over the weekend, which is text video. So you can put in a text prompt and you can get hyper realistic video out the other side. Sora with ChatGPT was due to be announced, still hasn't come yet. Kling in China has already been announced, that's there, but we in the West don't get access to that yet. But Luma Labs has just come up with something that they're calling Dream Machine, which is a really interesting one that is, going to then maybe solve that challenge of getting, text to sort of using AI. And I could imagine that going out in short video clips to, existing customers on newsletters, for example. So each of these AIs, I think, are going to have different roles in the customer journey. So they'll all be there almost as our little assistants performing different functions. And I think for most marketers and business owners, it's about figuring out, again, it's process mapping, figuring out where your gaps are that AI can plug into. And I think once we start to do that, we'll start to get some real value and then know which ones we should be subscribing to.
Yeah, that's so valuable about prioritizing and organizing the AI into its use cases and where it works for you, and creating an organizational, systematic approach to where AI is working and how it's working. I love that. So you mentioned something about earlier about so many different aspects of talking about AI and how it's relatable in so many different ways. And it's one of the things you said, we're all just kind of defining this conversation, which is why I love having conversations, because I learn by talking about stuff and hearing ideas. I don't learn from being right with all my ideas, but I learn from sharing my ideas and even getting rebuttals and people being like, I see it a different way. And then I learn from that. So one of the, I think, fun things about AI is the philosophical thought of AI and, the psychology of where it will go. And I know that there's this fear with everybody where they fear that machines are going to take over humanity, and almost like the Terminator. And it's one of the fears. And I know it's more of a sci-fi and maybe unrealistic fear, but there is that fear out there. And I have this other thought where I feel like we have to be careful that humans don't become too much more machine, where humans don't lose their humanity. And I think that might be the biggest fear. And I look at even how I'm attached to my cell phone over here, and I'm attached to media and social media, and I get more and more attached to AI. And then you got Elon Musk and Neuralink. I think we talked about the last one. I think that's an interesting concept. But what do you see both? Like, where do you land on that? I don't know if humans overcome this, which I think we always do, but do you see us becoming more machine-like? Do you see AI become more human-like? Where do we go?
Yeah, it's the big question, isn't it? It really is. And I think it's one of those things that could play out either way. I don't want to sit here and say that, oh no, we're all going to be fine. There is a chance that it hits us in ways that we cannot even yet conceive, that we can't even figure out the things that it might do for us and with us, but to us.
Yeah.
I think the reality is that we're smart. I mean, we as human beings have not been on this planet for a huge amount of time relative to the age of the planet. But what we have done is we've impacted in ways that, had somebody landed on this planet 200,000 years ago, they would never have realized that we could have done this in such a short period of time.
True.
So I think we'll figure it out as we go. I think one of the profound challenges that we have, though, is the balance of this authenticity and honesty and doing things with love rather than with fear and with anger and with aggression. I think that's more of a danger to us than actually the machines taking over. I think as long as the big players and as long as we as the users of these devices and of these technologies can just retain en masse a real kind of wholesome attitude and an honest attitude and do things in the right way because they're the right thing, rather than, and we know that not everybody's that, so we know that there are people who have another agenda. But if they can be really limited and really kind of restricted in how that plays out, then I think on balance, we're going to be great. I think on balance, it'll all be good. But we've got to get the rules in place. We've got to get regulations. The technology needs to be self-policing in lots of ways so that it gets found out. And if you look at, again, going back to the Sora by OpenAI example, one of the reasons why that hasn't been allegedly put out into the mass market is because they're still tussling with how to make it safe, that you can type in a phrase and you're going to get a video that is appropriate rather than you type in another phrase and that is the wrong kind of video. Right. So they're tussling with how do the sort of check and balances go in before it's released to the public, because we know what some humans can be like. And it's really unfortunate because it does restrict the rest of us, but it's totally the right thing to do.
Yeah, we definitely need to look. You're right. The governance and ethical usage of AI, especially when we get in that. And I think sometimes we think about ethical use of AI in business, but let's face it, all the social media companies have been using AI to track what we like to dial in, what we do, to understand us, to all that, whether you call it ethical or not. But then we are getting into some more broader or different type of conversations when you're talking about video, and especially as you talk about how easy it will start being to mimic you and myself, or our voice, our face, and using, I mean, one horrible video, even if it's not us, still implants an image that can implant a bias, that can implant, just down. So this ethical use of information will be interesting to see how they put laws and regulations around usage around that. That's a phenomenal point. Well, Neil, I looked forward to this conversation from the moment we talked because we had such a fun conversation. I'm glad you jumped on. I want you to close with final thoughts. Of course, how do people get a hold of you? How do my listeners get a hold of you? And more anything about your podcast and what you do. But just you got the last say here.
Oh, you're so kind, Ben. So, the podcast is the Neil Wilkins Podcast. If you Google that, you'll find me, but also obviously on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. There is only one Neil Wilkins podcast currently until an avatar of me suddenly appears and there are more than one. But right here, right now, that's the best way to get hold of the podcast. But also connect on LinkedIn, Neil Wilkins X, and other social networks as well. Yeah, it'd be great to hear from anybody who has any great use cases of the kinds of things that we're talking about. I always love to showcase people who are doing great work, because best practice, as we say with this playbook, is what we're all after. We all need to figure out collaboratively and together, how to take this forward. So yeah, please do share. Love to advocate some good work that people are doing.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you for joining me. I look forward to collaborating with you more.
Great. Thanks, Ben.